Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of our podcast, Idea to Audio. Can I hear a big round of applause? Okay, so before we actually dive into this new journey, where no cap, we just spill everything. Let's actually give a brief introduction about ourselves. So I'm Iman, I'm 19 years old and I'm from Malaysia.
Hello everyone, my name is Ahmed and I'm 17 years old and I'm from Egypt. And I just gotta say, I'm really happy to be sitting right here in front of you guys. You know, me myself, I've always wanted to start a podcast. I wanted to be a host, share my thoughts and opinions, just let everything out there to the world. And I'm really excited to interview some people, hear about their journeys and their life and everything. So I'm just here to say that I'm really grateful to be sitting here in front of you guys right now. And thank you guys also for tuning in and watching this episode. So enough about ourselves. Let's ask Iman, how did this podcast came to be?
Okay, so how this podcast actually started was on a late night on a random day. I was just talking to my friend, my roommate actually. Her name is Nina and she's the producer of this podcast. So she's actually sitting down behind the camera right now. So how this podcast came to be actually was we were talking about, our life choices, our life journey, and it was actually when we first entered. So we were still new to each other. So, and then we thought, hey, we think that other people have the same thoughts, the same opinions, and it just clicked at that moment. Like, why don't we create a safe space for us to talk about these opinions and invite others to join in as well?
So actually, this process of making the podcast was not so easy, I have to tell you. We've had several meetings, several discussions. We discussed about what should we talk about, what should we do in this podcast. And the very first thing that we started is the name of our podcast.
Name. Very important.
Yeah, but let me tell you, this was not an easy process. This was probably the hardest one yet.
Yeah.
I would say we had many suggestions, many names, but most of them were declined. Some just weren't catchy.
Yeah, they were already taken.
Yeah. But, I'm so glad that we landed on Idea to Audio.
I'm glad as well. I think it's quite catchy as well.
Yeah.
It's really unique. I like the Idea to Audio representing that our thoughts, our ideas can be translated to audio and given out and talked about in a podcast.
Yeah, this was the very last suggestion we had. So thankfully, we didn't give up on choosing a name.
So the purpose of our podcast was actually to create a safe space, as mentioned earlier, to talk about, our life choices, our life experiences and such, and just create a safe space for us all, a fun hangout spot. So basically, we thought that this podcast was easy because, you could just listen to this podcast on your way to school whilst relaxing at home, and you get to hear the ideas of many people just through listening to your earphones on your mobile device. So, and also it's a place where we can talk about navigating our young adult life and through adulthood.
Yeah, a big part of it is really, learning how to get into the adulthood for us, we're already almost grown-ups now.
Yeah.
So we're going to be out there in society. So we need to understand how do we deal, how are we prepared? Like, what's after this? What is after A levels? Are we prepared for our life? So that's what we want to talk about and make sure, we take the correct measurements so that we are ready and we are prepared.
Yeah, and sometimes it can be overwhelming, right?
It can be, yeah.
To determine your future life just by the choices you make now. So in this podcast, we want to just create a space where you guys can talk about, your ideas for the future. So, we haven't figured it all out yet, and there's necessarily no wrong or right to the discussion. So, in a way, this podcast is just for us to talk about. And sometimes it can be overwhelming, right? So, we want this podcast to help us, and also maybe to the listeners as well, on how to navigate through all of this. And we don't necessarily have the answers already, and there's no particular wrong or right to the discussion. It's just more to our discussion on how to approach life.
Yeah, and a very fun fact about our school is that this is an international
it's
school.
international.
So it's filled with people from many different countries and different culture.
Yeah, all
So
parts of the globe.
yeah, so this is something that we gotta take advantage of, to learn about them, their culture, their journeys, their languages, everything. So I feel like I really love this opportunity that I was given, So I want to learn from it, and I want to share all their journeys out there with you guys.
Yeah, especially because you're from Egypt, right?
Yeah.
And that's a very far away place.
Yeah, it
so
is.
The cultures will definitely vary, and
Very
here there's
different, yeah.
actually a lot of other races involved as well, like from Nigeria, from Maldives, from Pakistan. So it's a good way to venture into their culture and gain their perspectives as well on different topics.
So that's not all we're planning to talk about, really. We also want to talk about the issues that we face as Gen Z.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a lot of issues nowadays. We're overwhelmed by the social media, all the news, all the current issues that we face. So we want to talk about it. Just express. I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to us as well. Many of us have many different perspectives, many different journeys that we've been, issues. So it's nice to just share it out there. To let people hear you out. Maybe you can learn something from it, learn a new lesson. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, and especially because we're constantly consuming social media, so we're always, facing the issues on climate change, for example, or mental health. So it would be a good idea to use this podcast to just gain perspectives on, different people's interesting perspectives on this topic.
So like I said, we have a lot planned for you guys. Like, I really hope you guys can keep joining us on each episode. It just keeps getting more and more interesting than this. We have so much to talk about, so many guests to bring over, so many surprises, events, everything. So I know you guys will be hooked onto this podcast. Do not forget the name Idea to Audio. So to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on the first episode of our podcast. If you guys have also a project that you would like to share, some thoughts, some opinions, do feel free to do so. Okay?
Yeah, and on a last note, stay connected and let those ideas keep flowing. See you next
See you.
time.